At the Sterling Gala, a little girl in a pearl-white dress sat alone beneath a chandelier. She was Callista, the deaf daughter of formidable CEO Adelaide Sterling. Guests averted their eyes. Waiters hurried past. The orchestra thundered without mercy. A single-dad janitor, Elias noticed her small hands tracing invisible shapes. He knelt, smiled, and signed. Hello, slow, clear, respectful. Callista's eyes blossomed like dawn. Conversation stopped. Cameras lifted. In one heartbeat, silence finally spoke. Around them, the ballroom tilted toward hope, spellbound and changed. The Sterling Enterprises annual gala commanded the grandest ballroom in the city, where crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across marble floors polished to mirror perfection. Tonight's event promised $5 million for medical technology research, a cause that drew 300 of the city's most influential figures. Champagne flutes clinked in practiced harmony, while the orchestra filled every corner with Vivaldi, creating a wall of sound that pressed against the gilded walls. Yet beneath all this orchestrated elegance lay an uncomfortable truth in this room, full of voices raised in celebration. The most profound silence belonged to an 8-year-old girl. Elias arrived through the service entrance at 7:30, his janitor's uniform crisp despite 12 hours of wear. At 36, his shoulders carried the solid strength of a man who knew physical work. But his eyes held the quiet wisdom of someone who had learned to listen without words. His backstory wasn't complicated. Just heavy his Aunt Irene had raised him after his parents died, and she'd been deaf since birth. American Sign Language had been his first real language. The one that taught him love came through attention, not volume. When his wife passed away 3 years ago from a sudden illness, Elias had chosen this night shift at Sterling Enterprises not for the modest pay, but for the schedule that let him walk his daughter Serena to school each morning. Serena Carter, 7 years old, with her father's observant eyes and her late mother's warm smile, spent her evenings creating colorful ASL alphabet cards from construction paper. She'd learned sign language alongside speech, treating both as natural extensions of human connection. Tonight, she waited at home with Mrs. Peterson from next door, likely sprawled on the living room floor with her art supplies, crafting new ways to make letters dance. Adelaide Sterling moved through her gala like a general surveying a battlefield. At 34, she commanded attention without demanding it, her platinum blonde hair falling in perfect waves past shoulders, wrapped in a red designer gown that cost more than most people's cars. Every gesture calculated, every smile measured. The CEO of Sterling Enterprises had built her empire on precision and control. But when her eyes found her daughter sitting alone beneath the east chandelier, something fractured in that polished facade. Callista Sterling, 8 years old in her pearl-white dress, sat with the stillness of someone who had learned that movement drew attention, and attention brought disappointment. Callista had been deaf since birth, a reality Adelaide had met with every resource money could buy: the best doctors, therapists, specialized tutors. Everything except the one thing Callista needed most: a mother who could speak her language. Adelaide knew 17 words in ASL, learned in scattered moments between board meetings, but they felt clumsy in her hands, foreign and inadequate. She relied on Andrea, the sign language interpreter, to bridge the gap between them, turning their relationship into a translated conversation rather than a natural dialogue. The Sterling Board of Directors had made their position clear through Oliver, the senior member who never missed an opportunity to remind Adelaide that perceived weakness affected stock prices. Your personal situation, he'd said just yesterday, needs to remain personal. Investors want strength, not sentiment. The public relations team, led by the sharp-eyed Vivian, reinforced this message with marketing statistics and image consulting reports. They'd choreographed tonight's gala down to the minute, with Callista's appearance carefully limited to the opening ceremony long enough to humanize Adelaide, brief enough to avoid what Vivian called uncomfortable focus on limitations. The ballroom hummed with strategic conversations, deals disguised as small talk. Alliances formed over canapés. Clinton Ward, Adelaide's primary competitor in the medical technology sector, worked the room's western edge, his smile sharp as winter wind. The media section buzzed with activity, photographers capturing power handshakes while reporters like Henry Matthews hunted for the story beneath the story. Finn, the head of event security, monitored everything from his position near the main entrance, his earpiece crackling with updates from his team. But Elias saw none of the politics as he pushed his cleaning cart past the dessert station. His attention fixed on the small girl whose fingers moved against her dress. In patterns he recognized she was signing to herself, creating conversations with the air because no one else would join her. Her doll, clutched in her left hand, became her silent audience, as her right hand shaped words nobody saw. The early evening crowd swirled past Callista like water around a stone. A woman in diamonds paused nearby, her voice carrying that particular pitch of false sympathy. "Poor thing," she murmured to her companion, not even attempting to lower her voice after all. The child couldn't hear her. You'd think Adelaide would have arranged something more appropriate. They moved on without a backward glance, leaving Callista to watch their lips form shapes she'd learned meant dismissal. A waiter approached with a tray of drinks, saw the child, and veered away, as if deafness might be contagious. Another couple walked close enough that their shadows fell across Callista's white dress, but when she looked up hopefully, they were already past, absorbed in discussing quarterly projections. The girl's shoulders drew inward, making herself smaller, less visible, less of an inconvenience to the celebration flowing around her. Vivian materialized beside Adelaide, near the podium, her tablet clutched like a shield. "The silent auction is exceeding projections," she reported, then lowered her voice. "Perhaps we should relocate Callista to the green room. The photographers are getting curious about her isolation." Adelaide's jaw tightened. She wanted to see the party. "Of course," Vivian replied smoothly. "But we need to consider the optics. If someone captures the wrong moment..." "The wrong moment?" Adelaide's voice could have frozen champagne. "You know what I mean. We can't afford to have the focus shift from the fundraising to other narratives." Across the room, Elias set down his cleaning supplies. He'd watched long enough. The child's hands had shifted from creating words to simply opening and closing. A universal gesture he knew meant, please, someone, anyone. His work could wait. Some things mattered more than protocols. He approached slowly, deliberately, ensuring his footsteps created enough vibration on the floor that Callista would sense his approach. When he was still 6 feet away, he stopped, respecting her space. Then he lowered himself to one knee, bringing his eyes level with hers. His face opened into a gentle smile, not the condescending expression she'd seen all evening, but the genuine warmth of recognition. His hands rose slowly, clearly, forming the sign for hello. The movement began at his forehead, his flat hand moving outward in greeting, his eyes maintaining soft contact with hers. He held the sign longer than necessary, letting her see he meant it, that this wasn't just a gesture but an invitation. Callista's transformation was instantaneous. Her eyes widened, then sparked with something that had been absent all evening: hope. Her small hand rose tentatively, mirroring his sign, testing whether this was real. When Elias nodded encouragingly, she signed it again, stronger this time, adding a tiny smile that seemed to light her from within. The shift in the room was palpable. Conversations near them stuttered to a stop. A photographer's camera lowered, forgotten. The orchestra played on, but the music seemed suddenly distant, as if the universe had narrowed to this single point of connection between a janitor and a CEO's daughter. Elias's hands moved again, slower, careful to ensure she could follow. He fingerspelled C-A-L-L-I-S-T-A, each letter deliberate and clear. The girl's mouth opened in silent delight. He knew her name. Not just any name, but hers, spelled out in her language. She responded by pointing to herself, then signing yes. With such enthusiasm, her whole body seemed to vibrate with joy. From across the room, Adelaide watched this interaction with a mixture of emotions that threatened to crack her professional composure. Her daughter, her brilliant, isolated daughter, was glowing, and it had taken a janitor, a man whose name she didn't even know, to unlock that radiance. The contrast struck her like a physical blow. All her resources, all her power, and she couldn't give Callista what this stranger had provided in 30 seconds. Adelaide moved through the crowd with purpose now, her red gown cutting a path through the sudden whispers. She reached them just as Elias was teaching Callista the sign for friend, their hands moving in synchronized harmony. "What are you doing?" Adelaide's voice came out sharper than intended, defensive walls slamming into place. Elias rose slowly, respectfully, but didn't step back. Callista tugged at her mother's dress, her hands flying in excited signs. "He talks. He talks like me." The joy in her movements was impossible to miss, even for someone who knew only 17 signs. "I apologize if I've overstepped," Elias said calmly. "I saw she was alone, and I know ASL. I thought she might enjoy having someone to talk with." Before Adelaide could respond, Vivian appeared at her elbow. "Adelaide, we're live streaming. This is..." Drawing attention, Oliver materialized on her other side, his voice low and urgent. "You need to handle this. We can't have staff members becoming the story. Think about the optics, a janitor showing up the CEO at her own gala." Adelaide looked between them, then at her daughter's shining face, then at Elias, who stood quietly, waiting. The weight of expectations pressed down on her, the board's demand for strength, the public's hunger for drama, her daughter's desperate need for connection. "He was just being kind," she said finally, the words feeling insufficient. Elias nodded slightly. "Your daughter has beautiful signing. Natural rhythm. She's clearly been practicing." He turned to Callista and signed something that made her laugh, a real laugh, silent but full-bodied, the kind Adelaide realized she hadn't seen in months. "Where did you learn?" Adelaide found herself asking. "My aunt raised me. She was deaf. In our house, ASL wasn't accommodation, it was conversation." The simplicity of his statement carried a weight that made Adelaide's chest tighten. All her specialized tutors and therapeutic interventions, and she'd never thought of it that simply ASL wasn't about managing Callista's deafness. It was about joining her world. A small hand tugged at Elias's uniform sleeve. Both adults looked down to see Serena, who had somehow materialized beside her father. Mrs. Peterson stood near the service entrance, looking apologetic. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carter," she insisted when she heard it was the Sterling Gala. "Said she had to bring something." Serena held up a cloth bag, her eyes bright with purpose. "Daddy, is this the girl you told me about? The one who likes dolls?" Without waiting for an answer, she turned to Callista and pulled out a handful of colorful cards, her handmade ASL alphabet, each letter decorated with glitter and stickers. The two girls regarded each other with the straightforward assessment children excel at. Serena raised her hand and slowly signed, "Hello," then pointed to herself, and fingerspelled SERENA. Callista's response was immediate. She fingerspelled her own name, then held up her doll, making it wave. Within moments, they were sitting on the floor, formal gala forgotten, spreading the alphabet cards between them. Serena showed Callista how she'd drawn little animals next to each letter: A for alligator, B for butterfly. Callista traced the glittered letters with obvious delight, then began teaching Serena signs for each animal. Adelaide watched this easy connection with a combination of wonder and something that felt dangerously close to envy. These children had bridged a gap in minutes that she'd been failing to cross for years. The simplicity of it, the pure, uncomplicated acceptance, made her elaborate interventions seem suddenly overwrought. "Your daughter is very kind," she said to Elias. The CEO facade slipping slightly. "She's had good teachers," Elias replied simply. "Loss has a way of showing you what matters. We learned early that connection doesn't require sound." Adelaide wanted to ask more, to understand how this man in a janitor's uniform had solved what her money and influence couldn't, but Vivian's urgent whisper interrupted. "Adelaide, Clinton Ward is watching. And there are photographers. We need to manage this situation before it becomes tomorrow's headline." The mention of Clinton Ward sharpened Adelaide's focus. Her competitor would love nothing more than to paint her as weak, distracted by personal matters, unfit to lead. She could already imagine the spin CEO's child becomes charity case at her own gala. "Perhaps," Oliver suggested with false kindness, "we should move the children to a more private space? For their comfort, of course." Callista must have caught something in the body language because her signing became rapid, agitated. "They want me to leave. They always want me to leave when I'm happy. The accusation in those small hands hit Adelaide like ice water. Her daughter was right. Every time Callista found joy in public, someone found a reason to relocate her, to minimize the disruption her happiness might cause to Adelaide's image. Elias watched this play out, his expression carefully neutral. But his hands moved. Signing to Callista. Your voice matters. Tell them what you need. It was a simple encouragement, but Callista straightened as if he'd handed her armor. She stood, walked to her mother, and signed with deliberate clarity. I want to stay. I want to be here. Why do you let them hide me? The question hung in the air, visible only to those who could read the language but palpable to everyone watching the interaction. Adelaide's composure, so carefully maintained, began to crack. I don't, she began, then stopped. Because she did. She'd been hiding Callista, not from shame but from fear. Fear of appearing weak. Fear of judgment. Fear that her inability to communicate with her own daughter would be exposed. Finn's voice crackled through his earpiece, loud enough for Elias to hear as he stood nearby. We've got Clinton Ward's people in the media section. They're pushing for photos of the Sterling girl alone. Something about authentic moments of the gala. Elias stepped closer to Adelaide, his voice low. You're being set up. Ward's people want those isolation shots. They'll spin it as neglect. Use it to question your leadership capabilities. Adelaide's eyes snapped to his. How could you possibly know? I cleaned the conference rooms, including the one Ward's assistant used an hour ago for a call. Thin walls. They're planning to leak photos to question your family values angle in the medical tech initiative. The calculated cruelty of it made Adelaide's stomach turn. Using Callista's deafness, her isolation, as a weapon in corporate warfare. She looked at her daughter, now teaching Serena the sign for butterfly, oblivious to the machinations around her. What would you do? She found herself asking this stranger, who'd shown more understanding in 20 minutes than her entire advisory team. Elias considered. Don't hide her. Don't defend. Show them what they're refusing to see. That your daughter doesn't need their pity. She needs their respect. And how do I do that, when I can barely? Adelaide stopped, unwilling to admit her limitation aloud. You learn, Elias said simply. Not eventually. Now. Tonight. In front of everyone. The suggestion was radical enough to be either brilliant or disastrous. Adelaide Sterling, CEO of a Fortune 500 company, publicly struggling through basic sign language? The board would be horrified. Vivian would need sedation. Callista caught her mother's eye and signed something Adelaide didn't understand. The frustration of that moment, the wall between them, made of silence and fear, suddenly seemed more unbearable than any potential embarrassment. Teach me, Adelaide said suddenly. One phrase. Something I can say to her. That's real. Elias studied her for a moment, then nodded. The sign for, I see you. Not just looking, really. Seeing, he demonstrated slowly, pointing to himself. Then the sign for see. Then, pointing with emphasis. But you have to mean it. Children know when you're performing. Adelaide practiced the movement, clumsy at first. While around them, the gala continued its orchestrated swirl. Oliver looked apoplectic. Vivian was frantically typing on her tablet. But Adelaide focused only on getting the sign right, on making her hands say what her voice couldn't. The moment was interrupted by a commotion near the media section. Henry Matthews, the reporter, was holding up his phone, showing something to other journalists. Within seconds, the buzz spread. Someone had leaked a video. Finn moved quickly through the crowd, his expression grim. Ma'am, he said to Adelaide quietly. There's a situation. Someone's released edited footage from tonight, your daughter sitting alone. Looking. Neglected. It's already spreading online. Adelaide felt the floor shift beneath her designer heels. This was the kill shot, the perfectly timed attack, designed to destroy her credibility right at her own fundraising gala. She could see Clinton Ward near the bar, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "How bad?" she asked. Finn showed her his phone. The video was masterfully edited, Calista alone under the chandelier, guests walking past, waiters avoiding her. The caption read, "Sterling CEO's deaf daughter abandoned at gala while mother networks." Is this the family values leader in medical technology? The room's energy shifted as more people saw the video. Conversations became whispers. Whispers became stares. Adelaide felt the walls closing in, years of carefully built reputation crumbling in real time. But then Elias did something unexpected. He walked over to the media section, Serena's hand in his, and addressed Henry Matthews directly. "That's interesting editing," he said conversationally. "Removes all the context, doesn't it?" Henry, sensing a story, leaned in. "What context?" "Well, for starters, it doesn't show Miss Sterling checking on her daughter every few minutes, or the security detail specifically assigned to ensure Callista's comfort, or the fact that Callista herself chose that spot because she likes watching the chandelier's light patterns." Elias's voice remained calm. "Factual. But I suppose those details don't fit the narrative." "And you are?" Henry asked, his reporter's instincts engaged. "Someone who pays attention," Elias replied. "And someone who thinks using a child's disability for corporate warfare is about as low as it gets." The directness of the accusation caused a ripple through the listening crowd. Clinton Ward's expression tightened. This wasn't going according to plan. Adelaide watched Elias redirect the narrative with the skill of someone who understood that truth, simply stated, carried more weight than any spin. But what happened next changed everything. Callista had been watching the adult's tense body language. She understood something was wrong, something about her. She stood up, walked to the center of the gathered crowd, and began to sign, not to anyone in particular, to everyone, to the cameras, to the room that had ignored her all night. Serena, without hesitation, became her voice. The 7-year-old translated with the confidence of someone who knew this mattered. "My name is Callista. I'm 8 years old. I'm deaf, but I'm not broken. I see everything. I understand everything. I know when you look away. I know when you're scared of me. But I'm not scared of you." The room went absolutely still. Even the orchestra seemed to pause between notes. Callista continued signing, and Serena continued translating. "My mom loves me. She just doesn't know my language yet. But she's trying. That's what love is, trying, even when it's hard." Adelaide's composure finally shattered. Tears, real tears. Not the strategic kind she'd deployed in negotiations, ran down her face. She walked to her daughter, knelt despite the expensive dress, and signed the phrase Elias had taught her. "I see you." Callista's response was to throw her arms around her mother's neck. A collision of love that needed no translation. The cameras that had been ready to document a scandal instead captured something else entirely. A moment of genuine human connection in a room that had forgotten such things existed. But Clinton Ward wasn't finished. He approached with calculated concern. "How heartwarming," he said, loud enough for the microphones to catch. Though one wonders if this sudden display of maternal affection is perhaps motivated by the cameras. The accusation hung poisonously in the air. Adelaide started to rise, her CEO armor reassembling. But Elias stepped forward first. "Mr. Ward," he said pleasantly. Interesting timing on that video release. Almost like it was planned, edited, prepared in advance. Clinton's smile tightened. "I don't know what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything," Elias continued. "I'm stating that your assistant, Rebecca Chen, spent 40 minutes in conference room C earlier this evening, editing footage on her laptop. She was quite focused, didn't even notice the janitor emptying the trash, made several phone calls about releasing at the optimal moment for maximum impact." The color drained from Clinton's face. Around them, phones appeared, recording every word. Henry Matthews had the look of a reporter who just struck gold. "You can't prove," Clinton began. "Actually," Finn stepped forward, holding up a tablet. "Our security system records all access to conference rooms." Miss Chen entered at 6:45, left at 7:25. And she left behind something interesting in the trash printouts of the edited video's timestamp markers. Clinton Ward, who'd built an empire on controlling narratives, found himself at the center of one he couldn't spin. The attempted character assassination of Adelaide Sterling had become his own public relations disaster. But Adelaide wasn't paying attention to Clinton's downfall. She was focused on Callista, on learning the sign for "I'm sorry." Elias showed her, patient and clear, and she repeated it to her daughter. Callista's response was to teach her mother the sign for "It's okay, then I love you." The crowd watched this exchange with a mixture of emotions. Some were genuinely moved. Others, like Oliver, looked uncomfortable at this display of vulnerability. Vivian had stopped typing on her tablet, seemingly unsure how to manage a moment that had transcended management. Henry Matthews approached Adelaide. "Miss Sterling, would you care to comment on tonight's events?" Adelaide looked at him, then at Callista, then made a decision that would have seemed impossible an hour ago. "I'll let my daughter comment," she said. "Serena, would you translate?" And so Callista, through Serena's voice, addressed the room. "Everyone here talks so much but says so little. You're all so loud but you don't listen. My mom is learning to listen. That makes her stronger than all of you." The child's honesty, delivered with the blunt force of innocence, resonated through the ballroom. Several people looked away, perhaps recognizing themselves in the indictment. Others, though, stepped forward, genuinely interested in learning basic signs. What followed was unprecedented at a Sterling gala. Andrea, the ASL interpreter who'd been standing in the shadows all evening, found herself surrounded by guests wanting to learn how to sign "hello," "thank you," "nice to meet you." Serena became an impromptu teaching assistant, showing adults her handmade alphabet cards. Even Oliver, stiff with reluctance, attempted to fingerspell his name when Callista approached him. Elias began to retreat to his cleaning cart. Job done. But Adelaide caught his arm. "Wait. Please." He paused, and she struggled to find words that weren't inadequate. "I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me. Your daughter did all the heavy lifting. I just opened a door." "The door," Adelaide repeated softly. "You said earlier she doesn't need anything except doors." "Language doors." Elias nodded. "We all speak different languages, Miss Sterling. Some verbal, some physical, some emotional. The trick isn't making everyone speak yours. It's learning enough of theirs to say what matters." From across the room, Serena called out, "Daddy, Callista wants to show me the garden. Can we go?" Both parents looked at their daughters, then at each other. "5 minutes," they said in unison, then shared a small smile at the synchronicity. As the girls ran off, hands flying in animated conversation, Adelaide made another decision. "Mr. Carter Elias, I want to propose something. Sterling Enterprises needs someone who understands communication beyond words, someone who sees what others miss. Would you consider a position in our community outreach division?" Elias studied her. "Depends. Are you actually going to create programs for deaf children? Or is this just crisis management?" The directness should have offended her. Instead, it relieved her. "I want to create the Sterling Foundation for deaf children. Real programs, real support, real change. But I need someone who understands the community from the inside. Someone who won't let me settle for good intentions. I have a daughter to raise. I can't work corporate hours. Then we'll create hours that work. Part-time initially, transitioning to full-time as the foundation grows. And Serena is welcome here anytime. Seems like Callista could use a friend who speaks her language." Before Elias could respond, there was a commotion from the garden entrance. The girls had returned, but they weren't alone. Callista was leading a small parade of children, apparently. Several guests had brought their kids, who'd been confined to the supervised playroom. Serena had taught them all to sign friend, and they were practicing with enthusiastic inaccuracy. The sight of a dozen children filling the Sterling Gala with silent but joyful communication created a moment of profound shift. The orchestra had stopped playing. Watching. The adults had stopped networking. Watching. Even Clinton Ward, in the midst of his public humiliation, stopped to watch. Adelaide knelt beside Callista. "What are you doing?" Callista signed rapidly, and this time Adelaide understood enough to follow. Making noise. Our kind of noise. The profound truth of it that silence could be louder than sound when it carried meaning settled over Adelaide like a revelation. She looked at Elias. Will you help me learn? Really learn, not just memorize phrases. It's a commitment, he warned. ASL isn't just hand movements. It's facial expressions, body language, cultural understanding. It's joining a community, not just learning a skill. I'm ready, Adelaide said, and for the first time all evening, she meant it without reservation. What happened next would become legendary in Sterling Enterprises history. Adelaide Sterling, CEO, stood before her assembled guests and signed clumsily but determinedly a full apology. Andrea translated for those who didn't understand, but the message was clear even without words. She had failed to see her daughter's strength, had let fear override love, had chosen image over authenticity. But that ended tonight, effective immediately. She announced, Sterling Enterprises will require basic ASL training for all employees who interact with the public. We'll provide classes, resources, and incentives. If we're truly going to lead in medical technology that serves everyone, we need to understand that everyone includes those who communicate differently. The announcement sent ripples through the crowd. Oliver looked like he'd swallowed something bitter. Vivian was calculating PR angles at visible speed. But others, younger board members, innovative department heads, nodded with genuine approval. Henry Matthews raised his hand. Miss Sterling, critics might say this is reactionary, a response to tonight's controversy. Adelaide's smile was sharp as her red dress. Let them. The truth is, my 8-year-old daughter showed more courage tonight than I've shown in years. If learning from our children is controversial, then I'll gladly be controversial. The quote would make headlines, but not the ones Clinton Ward had planned. By morning, the story wouldn't be about neglect, but about transformation. The video that went viral wasn't Callista sitting alone, but Callista teaching a room full of executives to sign their names. The hashtag that trended wasn't about corporate coldness, but corporate evolution. The gala continued, but its character had fundamentally changed. Business cards were still exchanged, but so were ASL learning app recommendations. Deals were still discussed, but so were accessibility initiatives. The Sterling Medical Technology Fund received its $5 million, plus an unexpected additional $2 million specifically earmarked for deaf accessibility research. As the evening wound down, Elias and Adelaide found themselves in the garden, watching their daughters play. Callista was teaching Serena to feel music through vibrations in the ground, both girls lying on their stomachs on the stone pathway as the orchestra resumed inside. She's brilliant, Adelaide said softly. I nearly missed it. I nearly let them convince me that different meant less than. You didn't miss it, Elias corrected. You just needed someone to adjust your focus. We all do, sometimes. Adelaide turned to study him. Why did you really intervene? You could have lost your job. Ward could have made your life difficult. Elias was quiet for a moment, watching the girls. When my wife was dying, she made me promise something. She said, don't let Serena grow up in a world where kindness is considered weakness. Tonight, I saw a little girl who needed kindness. The rest was just noise. The simplicity of his moral compass made Adelaide's corporate calculations seem suddenly Byzantine. Your wife sounds like she was special. She was. But she also believed that special was everywhere if you paid attention. Your daughter proved that tonight. Inside, the gala was reaching its conclusion. Finn approached with an update. Ma'am, Ward's left. His team is in full damage control mode. The board wants an emergency meeting tomorrow. Adelaide nodded, then turned to Elias. Will you come? To the meeting? I could use someone who sees clearly when everyone else is playing angles. I'm a janitor, Mrs. Sterling. The board won't listen to me. You're a father who understands something they need to learn. And after tonight, I think they'll listen to anyone who can translate what really matters. Before Elias could respond, both girls ran over. Callista signed rapidly to her mother, and Adelaide caught enough to understand. She wanted Serena to come to her school tomorrow, to meet her class, to show them the alphabet cards. "If it's okay with Mr. Carter," Adelaide said, looking at Elias. He smiled. "I think that can be arranged." As they prepared to leave, Callista did something she hadn't done all evening. She spoke. Her voice was unusual, shaped by deafness, but clear. "Thank you." She was looking at Elias when she said it, but then she turned to her mother and signed the same words, adding, "For learning." Adelaide's response required no translation. She pulled her daughter close, her designer dress forgotten against the garden dirt, and held her as if making up for every moment of distance. The next morning brought the expected chaos. The video of Adelaide learning ASL had been viewed 12 million times. The Sterling Foundation for Deaf Children was formally announced, with Elias named as Community Liaison. Andrea was promoted to Director of Accessibility Education. Clinton Ward issued a hollow apology that fooled no one and faced a board revolt at his own company. But the real change was smaller, quieter. It was Adelaide arriving at the office with ASL learning apps on her phone. It was Callista attending board meetings, signing her observations while Andrea translated, her insights proving surprisingly astute. It was Serena becoming a regular presence at Sterling Enterprises, her handmade alphabet cards eventually becoming the template for official company learning materials. 6 months later, the first Sterling Foundation Community Center opened. The dedication ceremony was entirely silent. Every speech, every announcement delivered in ASL. The message was clear. This wasn't about accommodation, but about expansion. Not about limitation, but about possibility. Elias spoke, signed at the ceremony. His message was simple. We think of language as words, but it's really connection. We think of disability as absence, but it's really difference. We think of silence as empty, but it's really full of potential, full of meaning, full of all the things we miss when we're too busy talking to see. In the audience, Adelaide translated for those still learning. Her signing had improved dramatically, though Callista still corrected her with the patient condescension 8-year-olds perfected. Their relationship had transformed from translation to conversation, from distance to dance. The ripple effects continued. Other corporations began implementing similar programs. Schools added ASL to their language curricula. The Sterling Gala became an annual silent auction. Literally silent, with all bidding done in sign language. What had begun as one man's simple kindness had become a movement. But for Elias, the real victory was smaller. It was Callista and Serena, now best friends, creating elaborate signed stories that made both girls collapse with silent laughter. It was Adelaide joining their family dinners, her CEO armor replaced with casual comfort, learning that Elias made excellent lasagna and that grief shared became lighter. It was the four of them at the park, hands moving in conversation that needed no sound, connected by something deeper than words. The last scene would stay with everyone who witnessed it. Another gala, 1 year later. This time, when the orchestra began, Callista stood up and danced. Not to the music, she couldn't hear it, but to the vibrations she felt through the floor, to the visual rhythm of others moving, to her own internal melody. Serena joined her, then other children, then, amazingly, some adults. Adelaide watched her daughter spin in her pearl-white dress. The same one from that night a year ago, but now worn with pride instead of isolation. Elias stood beside her, no longer in a janitor's uniform but in business casual that still somehow looked uncomfortable on his solid frame. "She's teaching them her version of music," he observed. "She's teaching them everything." Adelaide corrected. "That different doesn't mean less. That silence isn't empty. That being seen matters more than being heard." They stood together, watching their daughters lead a revolution disguised as a dance. Around them, the Sterling Ballroom had transformed from a space of strategic networking to one of genuine connection. The chandelier that had witnessed Callista's isolation now reflected her joy, multiplied across its 1,000 crystals. Vivian approached with her ever-present tablet. The foundations received another 10 million in donations tonight. And there are requests for Sterling programs in 17 cities. Adelaide nodded, but didn't look away from the dance floor. "To all of it? All 17? All of them. And Vivian?" Adelaide turned to her PR director. "No press releases. Let the work speak for itself." As Vivian retreated, Elias smiled. You've changed. We all have, Adelaide replied. That's what happens when someone shows you a door you didn't know existed. On the dance floor, Callista signed something to Serena that made both girls giggle. Then they ran over to their parents, hands flying with excitement. Dance with us! They signed in unison. And so, they did Adelaide Sterling, CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and Elias Carter, former janitor turned foundation director, joining their daughters in a dance that followed no music except the rhythm of connection. Others joined them, the ballroom filling with movement that transcended sound. The photographer who captured that moment, 4 people, hands linked, spinning in synchronized silence while around them, a room full of people learned that joy needed no volume would win a Pulitzer. But the real prize was smaller and infinitely more valuable. It was the moment when Callista signed to her mother. You see me now, and Adelaide signed back, smooth and sure. I always saw you. I just had to learn how to show it. The story could have ended there, but life, unlike stories, continues. The Sterling Foundation grew. Elias and Adelaide's relationship evolved from partnership to something deeper, built on shared purpose and mutual respect. Serena and Callista became not just friends but sisters, in all but blood, their bond proving that family was defined by choice, not chance. But the most important change was almost invisible. It was in every small moment, when someone chose to see instead of look, to connect instead of merely communicate, to understand that the loudest voice in any room might be the one that made no sound at all. It was in every child who learned ASL, not because they had to, but because they wanted to talk to their friend. It was in every parent who discovered that their child's difference was actually their strength. And it all began with a single moment. A janitor who noticed a little girl's loneliness. A simple sign for hello. A door opened between 2 worlds that had always existed side by side, but never quite together. In that moment, silence spoke louder than any words ever could. And everyone finally listened.